Well, my great-grandparents, his mother and daddy were here before that time, and he was born here in the late 1800s. George Washington Gainey. And then my daddy, he married Esther Brannan, and they had 4 girls and 1 boy. And my daddy was the boy, next to the baby, Millard Gainey. He grew up in New Home, which no longer exists. A friend told me that he was standing with my daddy when the government came to bulldoze his parents' house down. Daddy was not sent off to the war like everyone else that lived around him. He was the only young man left there. They said he was flat-footed, and so they didn't take him in service. My daddy has outwalked everybody I know, but he was flat-footed, so they didn't take him. Well, and 2, he was an only son to help his parents. So the government came, and Daddy stood. This man told me this. I was 4 years old when we moved out of New Home. New Home is down in the Eglin Reservation, and it was taken over, public domain, when the war was going on. Eglin took over all the New Home and Alice Creek. Those were 2 communities there, and Eglin took them over. So they gave people very little to move out. This man told me that he was standing beside my daddy, and my daddy was begging them to wait till he could find someone. They had nowhere to go, so he was begging them to wait till he could find someone to help him move the house, because he moved the little house that he built for our family. But it was a small house. Well, my grandparents' house was a big house with a foxtrot. And so he begged and cried and stood there begging, and they bulldozed it down with him standing there watching. So then he had to get his parents out, so they came and found a place just to rent right off 331. And that's, from 4 years old, I was standing with my grandmother when she passed away. It was a terrible experience for me because I was close to my grandparents. And then Daddy started building the house that we grew up in, and now that our son Chuck owns. So I grew up there, and Daddy just did everything that he could to help our family survive. Okay, this was the Cosin family. The extended too. They extended Cosin family. They were visiting at one of the Cosin homes, and Eglin were doing night bombings, and they got off track, and they had lanterns and everything hanging out because they were sitting on the porch visiting at night. And I think when the bomb hit, my parents were close enough that they were sitting out on the porch, and they heard and they saw what happened, and they said something bad has happened. So they knew that it was a bomb or something. And they found out the next day, of course, that it was. But the Cosins, several lives were lost and several were injured. And there's a plaque down there now about the Cosin family. But the Cosin family also ties us into my mother's side, in that my granddaddy Will Gandy, and his brother Charlie were orphans. Well, really indentured slaves. Their parents died. Their mother died not long after Charlie was born, and their daddy died when when Will was born, and their daddy died when Charlie was about 10 years old. Well, people then would take children and they'd work them and sleep them and feed them, just really indentured slaves. They owed everything to the host family. So one day, the mule wouldn't plow, 8 years old, my granddaddy, and he told me this story himself, that he picked up a little switch and tried to make the mule go, you know. Well, 2 old maid school teachers that he was working for saw what he did, so they went out and beat him until blood ran down his back. That night, he ran away and ran to the house where Charlie was working and woke him up, and they both, from Aliquot, 8 and 10 years old, walked to the Funiac that night. The next day, I'm thinking probably was Saturday, because that's when people went to town to get their groceries and all, you know, supplies for the next week. He ran into, I'm sure they were probably begging for food or money to buy food, but they met 7 brothers who were Cosins. And they told the brothers their story. Well, they told them, we're taking you home with us. So they did. They took them home with them, and their mother said, Grandmother Bally is what they called her. She said, now boys, I'm going to raise you just like I raised my own. And she did. And Charlie actually married Bama Cosin, one of the sisters in that family. So when my mother's mother, died at 28 years old, she had 8 children. And they lived in Kynard, Florida, which is near Marianna. I don't think it's even a community anymore. It may be a community, but there's nothing there. She said that her daddy told her, her daddy asked her, wrote Charlie and told Charlie that what had happened. He said, you bring those 8 kids on over here. So my granddaddy came over to the Funiac, moved in the house with Charlie and Bama Cosin, who had 5 children, and the 2 of them, and granddaddy with 8 children and him. So there were 13 children and 3 adults in 2 houses and 2 rooms.
Wow.
So he told us then, told the children, he said, the only family we have here besides Charlie is the Cosin family. And said, you can call her Grandma Cosin because she's the one who raised me. When I was in high school, well, all of us, Daddy and Mother both made sure that we did everything we wanted to do, like be involved in everything we wanted to be involved with. Well, both sisters were majorettes. I was a cheerleader. Raymond was a football player. So we enjoyed life. We had a happy, happy home. And Daddy and Mama made sure of that we knew we were loved. Now, you know, back then they didn't tell you they loved you every day like I tell my husband and my son, I love you every day. And they didn't do that. In fact, I was asking my brother the other night, I said, do you ever remember Daddy telling us he loved us? And he said, no, I don't, but we knew it, didn't we? I said, absolutely. We knew we were loved. Even after I went to high school, graduated, I could bring couples home. We could bring couples home with us, and Daddy always had something planned. I'll take you skiing. I'll take you fishing. I'll do whatever y'all want to do. I'll have it ready. And he did. Just made everybody want to be around him all the time. And my mother constantly cooking those big cat head biscuits. I mean, everybody knew when they came to our house, they would eat. And we never went without. Never went without. In high school, as a cheerleader, I loved school, and I think I loved that more than I did school because I really I didn't know how to study. It came easy, I'm thankful to say, and I just picked it up, you know. I never forget Miss Gaston at that time, my bookkeeping teacher. she called my friend and I out because that was during basketball season, and they had basketball games 3 days a week. So we would get on the bus, cheerleaders could ride with ball players to the games no matter where they were. And I missed a lot. We both missed a lot of bookkeeping. And with bookkeeping, you have to stay up. Well, she called us out of the room just before final exams. And she said, ladies, if you two don't make above an 80 on your final exam, you will not graduate. Well, needless to say, we both made above 80. And we graduated in 59. And then I met Charles in 1960, and we were just friends. We were friends for a whole year before he asked me for a date for baccalaureate. And then he had a date with another girl for graduation. I realized he called me, he was going to LSU to get his degree. So that didn't happen. I put him through LSU to get his degree, his master's. But it's back in high school, we could do things, we didn't worry about people harming us. You could walk around the lake at night. You didn't worry about somebody trying to harm you. And I keep talking about, I said, those were some of the most wonderful years growing up in the 50s. And I made it sound so good that Chuck said, Mom, I really wish I'd lived in the 50s. But they were easy times. We had the Lebanese conflict going on, but we really weren't involved in war. And a lot of our young guys went to service, but they joined. And they were not, they came home. It's just a different world than what we live in today. I remember growing up at the house, Daddy always loved a crowd. He loved to have people there. We'd have big peanut boilings, taffy pulls, where you could pull that taffy, and now I think about it, that somebody's hands might not have been clean then, but we didn't think about that then.
Right.
We didn't think about any diseases. So we always had a crowd, and we had a large family. At family reunions, the kids have slept under the dining room table on the floor. There'd be so many people there. Daddy built he had a 200-yard gill net, and this was before they made a law to stop this, but he had a 200-yard gill net, and we'd go down to the bay, and he could spot those mullet way off. And he'd say, okay, here comes the school. And he'd throw out that net and circle that school of mullet. And we would jump off into knee-deep water and pull the mullet out of the net, throw them in the boat. Out of the net, throw them in the boat. And then we'd come back to the shore and have a fish fry. Mama always had everything ready. She took it with us because she knew we were going to catch fish. So we had good times like that. And we've had good times with cousins. We have a lot of cousins, especially on Mama's side, that were about the same age of us. So we had a lot of cousins around all the time. We had one family that came every weekend from Blue Heights at Eglin. He worked at Eglin. And they came every weekend on Friday afternoon, went back on Monday morning. And they stayed with us every weekend. Had 6 kids. We had 4. Loved to go to Grayton Beach. And Rosa Gorham Sullivan was my cheerleader sponsor, and we got her to go as our chaperone. And we'd rent the little green cottage across from Grayton's store. Several of us. We would go to the store and dance. And we loved the Alabama guys to come down. And they came down on weekends during the summer. So we enjoyed meeting all these new people. Carloads of girls would drive down, but we spent a lot of time, I did, at Grayton. I'm president of the museum board and have been for many years. I'm vice president of the Chautauqua Hall of Brotherhood Foundation. I'm secretary for Grit and Grace. I have volunteered with, and I think you can write Marie Volunteer Hinson, but I have volunteered with the hospice group, visiting the nursing homes, and I'm the volunteer coordinator at Lake Fest. It was my letter that got Lake Fest started.
Right.
So I volunteer for Lake Fest. I get the volunteers for Lake Fest. Everything I can think of, I just stay busy. And I like that. I want to stay busy. I'll be 83 next month, and I've had a wonderful life, and been married to a wonderful person. Have a great son. I really don't have any complaints. You know, I've done what I've wanted to do in life, and I can see the end of the tunnel, but I'm not ready for it yet.